Hello and welcome back to Mad Mouse Games. Today I'm going to be painting this miniature from the Reaper Bones 5 core set. Now, this miniature really reminds me of one of my favorite characters from fiction, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, Ranger of the North. It reminded me especially of him because of the scene in the movie where he fights the Nazgul at Weathertop. He wields his sword and a torch. Because of that, I wanted to paint him to look like Aragorn, as well as do a glow effect for the first time with a paintbrush. Try to see how that would look, and let's get into it.
So here you can see the miniature before I started painting. I started by just adding gray for his tunic, as that's how it appears in the movie. And again, while applying all my base coats, I always try to use as large a brush as possible so that I can cover surface area quickly, and I don't worry too much about whether or not that paint gets onto other parts of the miniature, as I can clean that up later. After applying a base coat to his tunic, I went to his coat next, which in the movie is actually kind of a really dark green, so I started with that kind of a base coat and applied that liberally. Next, I applied brown to all of the leather straps, his gauntlets, as well as his quiver on the back to make those leathers really stand out among the green and gray of his tunic. I also decided to paint his hair with the same color brown, although I went back later with a darker brown and applied that instead, as well as made the torch a slightly darker brown to distinguish it from the leather. Next was an even lighter brown for his bow. After that, just a little bit more of that gray that I decided to put on his bedroll so that the color was kind of the same as his tunic. Next, it was time for metallics, which I did a little dab there, as well as on the chainmail that's kind of underneath his tunic, as well as for his sword. Then I did just a little bit of gold to kind of break up the hilt from the actual blade of the sword, as well as on the pommel. Finally, I did just a wash over the chainmail, tunic, and cloak to give them a little bit of depth and some shading. Then it was on to the skin, so I decided to go with kind of a more reddish, pinkish color as a base coat, which I would then go back over with lighter and lighter kind of skin tones. That way a little bit of the red would show through, making the skin look a little more realistic. I put this on his hands, his face, and I did try several times to do some eyes, but to no avail. I couldn't get it to look good, so I kind of gave up on it. But the rest of the skin I thought looked really well. Finally, we're on to highlights. I started by highlighting the leather with just lighter browns right down the middle and kind of leaving little marks on the edges to just give it a little bit of a pop. Next, it was on to the torch. I painted the whole thing yellow. Eventually, I would come back through and paint a little bit more toward the top orange, and then just the very tips of the flames a nice red color to give it a nice appearance of actually being on fire. And finally, it was time to try and do a glow effect. So in order to do this, what I did was took the yellow paint I had used for the flame, and I thinned it down to almost like a wash, but closer to a glaze. So that's just a little bit of a thicker wash, basically, that should, in theory, basically just do a light little layer of yellow over everything you put it on, so you can still kind of see the underlayer. And that's kind of the idea of how glow effect works. So as you can see here, it's me kind of painting it on. There were several times I went and rubbed the yellow off if it was too thick, and I just tried to put it on the tops of things or where I thought the flame light would hit, which is why I ended up taking it off of this section here. But you can kind of see how easy it is to wipe it off with your finger. I ended up wiping pretty much all of that yellow I put on his cloak off because I kind of figured it would be blocked by his hand. And so basically I just glazed it. I think I did it twice on some areas where I thought the light would hit higher, like on the top of his head. And then eventually I came through and did a glaze on his sword, because obviously the metal is going to reflect that light. And that actually was probably the best part of this glow effect, was the actual light bouncing off of his sword. It was very subtle, and I thought it ended up looking really good in the finishing touches.
So, there he is. Cute little guy. Not too bad if I do say so myself. I enjoy him, and I look forward to putting him on a table in front of my players at some point. But I'd like to thank you for sticking around till the end of the video. If you liked it, please leave us a like, comment what else you want to see me paint, and subscribe if you're not already. And join me as I go through the process of painting up the whole Reaper Bones 5 core set and expansions that I got, and stay tuned for other things in the future. Again, thank you for watching, and have a great day.